All right. So welcome to a demonstration of the NeurOptimal Neurofeedback system. I'm going to answer questions that you have, talk a little bit about how the system works. And yeah, so this system, the NeurOptimal system, is a unique system in that it's the only system on the market that is dynamical neurofeedback. And what makes that a significant difference is that with the first generation of neurofeedback systems called protocol-based neurofeedback, protocol-based neurofeedback allows people to use a brain map to set the protocols, because it looks at where there are disruptions in brain function. And so the trainer needs to be an expert in recognizing that there is protocols and that it's done in a linear fashion. So if somebody has a brain map showing that they have dysfunction in what we would call areas that produce anxiety or depression, when you're doing protocol-based neurofeedback, you need to decide which protocol to train first. So you would need to decide whether to do the anxiety first or the depression first. And so part of the reason for protocol neurofeedback to require the brain map, which gives you a sense of what's going on and then setting protocols, is that when neurofeedback was first introduced, the power of and the speed of home computer technology was slower than the speed at which the human brain performed functions. So you had to take out some of those functions and externalize them in order to be able to give the feedback to the brain. So now coming back to dynamical neurofeedback, what we're appreciating that is different about this design is that all of the functions are now integrated into the software, because the design is based on computer speed being at the same speed of the human brain. So it was about 11 years ago that NeurOptimal became a fully automated system, which means that it's registering shifting in the brain in real time and giving feedback to that individual brain. So another way of saying that is you could say that that brain mapping technology is now integrated into the system and the decision making of the system. So I'll talk a little bit more later about dynamical neurofeedback. But what I really want you to understand is that this system is very easy to use. Anybody can learn how to use this technology in about 5 minutes. So that's exactly what we're going to do first off, is I'm going to hook myself up and show you how easy it is to use this technology. So, okay, all the NeurOptimal systems come on a Surface Pro tablet. They're now on the Surface Pro 7 Plus, and it's a very easy process. So once your system is on, which is the press of a button, you can either access the software from the menu below, or you can click on the windows, and here's the NeurOptimal program. So first thing I'm doing is I'm going to open the software. I'm going to add a name. And then I am going to put on the sensors. And at that point, I'll tell you more about what this box does and the sensors do. But first off, I just want to show you how easy it is to enter somebody's name. So sometimes it takes a couple of seconds for the program to actually open. Okay, so this is the main screen that you will use for starting a session. And to add a client's name, you double click on client, and then you type the first name. I'm doing this backwards. So I'm going to just be super simple here. It's amazing how I can't find the keys backwards. That's just my first initial, so let's do that. And last name, Baker. It's so funny how I don't know where the keys are. There we go. Okay, so there we have it. And then we press OK. And there I am. So that's how easy it is to add a client name. And then to start a session, you just double click on the person's name. So super simple. So there are a couple of pieces to this system, and it is, the next thing I'm going to show you is the amplifier. So this little box takes the direct voltage, which is picked up off of your head, and sends it into this box to turn that voltage into numbers. And then those numbers go into the software and are read in real time. So this software is looking for change in data 256 times per second. So just to give you some idea of how frequently and how quickly the brain is changing states, this is 256 times per second that it's looking for data. And I will talk in a minute about what kind of data it's looking for. Okay, so 1020 paste is the conductive paste. I would say this is actually the part of the process people hate the most, because people don't like goop in their hair. And there's always questions like, well, why can't you use a dry sensor? Like the Muse headband, right? That's a dry sensor. And Dr. Val Brown, who is the main technology designer, he said, as soon as there is some other technique that is as fast or faster for transmitting that information, then he said, I'm happy to switch. But right now, the best way to pick up on that voltage and transmit that information as fast as possible is using conductive paste and silver sensors. And remember that this system is all about giving real-time feedback to the brain. So the most important feature is that we give data to the brain exactly when there is change happening, so that the brain can register that change. So actually, I'm going to put my hair up to make this a little bit easier, but you're going to see how easy it is to do a self hookup, let alone do a hookup on somebody else. But so the key to the paste not getting everywhere is to part the hair. So, and just so you know, the sensor goes somewhere roughly in the middle of the ear and the crown of the head, and you part the hair and then smush it down. And you should feel, if you're doing a self hookup, you should feel kind of the cool paste a little bit. And that way, you know, you have it attached enough to the scalp and that it's not just sitting on top of the hair. And that's why you also part the hair. So you can pick up 95% of the voltage on the head and any location. So when people talk about, really getting site-specific information from different places, that's a bit of a myth. Because 95% of the data can be picked up anywhere. And there's a bit of a debate that goes on about that. But my understanding is that it's not, the location is not as important as people say it is. So this is a reference that's used in calculations that are made by the software. And then the third sensor on the right side is a grounder. And then on the left side, again, it's the same. We're doing C3 and C4, the actual locations. So, it's roughly halfway. Part the hair, smush down the sensor. And then, and it's like a little, you'll see that's like a little scoop on each. You just want enough paste that it's making contact with the silver. Oops, I have that kind of in the way there. Okay, voila. That's the hookup. And so to start the session, you just double click on the name. And you hear a click and you see a green light go on the amplifier. That means it's registering it. So the main way that feedback is given through the NeurOptimal system is through auditory. So I'm just going to turn up the music. So you can use any music, and a lot of trainers will download a bunch of different music and give people the option of what kind of music they want to listen to. This has the standard NeurOptimal music on here. It was written by a composer specifically for this system. Just going to turn up the volume a bit just so you can hear it. So that's the music. I'm going to turn it down again just so we don't have competition with me speaking. So going back to how this system works, and then I'll talk a little bit about the graphics here and what you're seeing. So we have the EEG sensors put on the side of the head, clipped to the ears, and we have a grounder. We are taking the voltage off of the scalp that's registered on the scalp. It's sent through the amplifier and registered and analyzed by the software. So what is the software looking for? The software is looking for the kind of electrical dance that the brain does when it's about to go into a state change or perform some function. And in the millisecond that the system registers that electrical dance, it interrupts the music. So the way the feedback is given is actually through negative feedback. So the brain is listening to the music, and we use auditory as the main sense perception to give feedback because the brain is always listening. That's the primary way that the brain registers change in the environment, because we can listen even when we're asleep. So the brain is listening to the music, and whenever there is a change in functioning in the brain, there is that micro interruption. And the brain registers that micro interruption and pays attention. So this is the automatic functioning brain. This is our survival brain that is listening and registering. And what we want it to register are the choices that it's making moment by moment. So I'm going to use an example here. I'm going to turn this down. I'm going to use an example. The stress response, which most of us know is a very active function of the brain. That's part of our survival brain's way of registering when there is danger. And we all know that things like anxiety, insomnia, worrying, part of that is due to us being habituated to a stress response. So the brain is supposed to use the stress response when there is imminent danger. So in less than a minute, there's something that's going to cause bodily harm, and the brain registers that and automatically will use one of its three strategies: punch it, run from it, play dead, right? The fight, flight, freeze response, to take effective action. And then it's supposed to come back into a state of what we call regulation, which is perceiving the environment as safe, being able to be calm, be able to focus, be open. And so the brain is supposed to go in and out of a stress response as needed, but basically use that state of regulation as its resting point. Well, what we understand about, what we call symptoms, if we're mental health professionals or if we're just individuals, what we register is like not being at our best, right? Worrying too much, not sleeping so well, being reactive, easy to anger. That is the brain being habituated to a stress response, and the brain not registering that it is using a strategy that is not appropriate for the here and now. So going back to the neurofeedback and how it works. So we're going to give it cues continuously, multiple times per second, cueing it to pay attention, right? And really what we want it to pay attention to is what it's doing that's habitual, that is not appropriate for the here and now. So in the same way that you might be sitting and having lunch with a friend and you don't realize it, but you're totally lost in thought, thinking about some work problem. And your friend all of a sudden says, Jason. And in that moment, right, you register everything. You register that you were lost in thought. You register that you're actually sitting having lunch with a friend, right? And now you have the opportunity to make a different choice, right? So you're brought out of a habit into the present moment, and now you can engage in whatever way you see appropriate. So that's analogous to what happens for the automatic functioning brain when that cue happens, is it pays attention. It's going to see everything. It's going to see what function it's about to perform. It's also going to see what's happening in the environment. So let's say that the brain was going into a stress response, some version, either hyperarousal or hypoarousal of that stress response, but it's also registering the environment in the present moment. Oh, I'm sitting in a room, listening to some music. I have some things on my head. Why am I going to a stress response? There's no nobody's coming at me with a knife. There's no car. Why would I be doing that? Right. So in that millisecond, the brain will shift out of that stress response and into functioning that's in alignment with the here and now. And so many times per second, right, the brain is being invited to do this. So during a session, the brain is going to re-register itself and be in alignment more with present moment needs. But that's actually not the most significant thing that happens when you're doing the NeurOptimal training. The most significant thing is that we're actually prompting the brain over and over and over again during these series of training sessions to register that there's a better way to operate. And that better way is come into the present moment, gather present moment data, then decide what you're going to do. You're going to do functions that are more appropriate, and you're going to use your energy more efficiently, right? So the stress response is a huge expenditure of energy, and the brain is designed to use energy efficiently. So the software and the design of the system is very much designed in sync with how the brain naturally functions. It wants good data because it wants to make efficient decisions that are effective. So that's basically what we're prompting it to do. We're prompting it to learn. So what happens over those series of sessions is the brain learns, gosh, all the good data is in the present moment. I'm going to do this practice even when I'm not hooked up to this system because it serves me. And that's really when you see people starting to really shift, right? They calm down and cheer up more if they're kind of habituated to that stress response. They're able to focus when there's work in front of them that they need to focus. So as you can see, this system doesn't care about a diagnosis. Really, it's about mirroring back to the brain what it's doing, and the individual's brain knows what is inappropriate, what it needs to change. So you could say this is diagnostically agnostic. It doesn't care. And the other thing is that it doesn't matter what's happening in the present moment that is maladaptive. It's going to change that. So it's also a non-linear system, right? So if you're going up into that anxiousness or going down into that hypoarousal or that collapse, hopeless, right? And you're going in and out of that, right? You might flip between them. That's the natural non-linearity of the brain and how it functions. And so this system also captures and is responsive in the same way the brain functions, which is in a non-linear way. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit more about the screen here, just so you can understand the features. So this is the professional NeurOptimal system. And right here is the media screen. I'm just going to move this a little bit closer. Hopefully that's better for you. And it just basically, you can see how much time is left. You can see, you can skip songs if you want to move on to a different song. So that's where you choose your media. This is the one that people like a lot, which is, so these are your different bands of your Hertz frequencies that are firing at any given millisecond. And there's nothing to analyze here. Again, the trainer is doing no analysis, not setting any protocols, again, because we're letting that brain decide what of its functioning it needs to shift in order to be efficient and effective in its decision-making based on current moment needs. So I really think about this as historical, because it used to be like 12 years ago, you would look at these bands before it was a fully automated system. It was like, everybody make sure that their sound is muted. Amani, I think that's you. That's, oh, I'm going to mute you. There we go. Sorry. So it used to be, before this system was fully automated, the trainer was checking to see if the bands were out of range, and there was like another visual in there that helped them. And then they would shift the training a little bit so the person wasn't getting too much feedback. So this is really just kind of a feature that's historical. It's not something you use at all in terms of assessment or setting the training. And then the other thing that's on here, oh, where did my GForce window go? All right, my GForce window went away. All right, well, the GForce window, which you can't see, I'm sorry, I don't know where it went to.
Natalie?
Yes.
Tap on NeurOptimal logo in the lower taskbar and choose the different windows from there.
Yeah, it's only giving me this one. I know, usually.
Or the X in the top right corner.
I do this. Is that going to stop the program? Oh, there it is. Okay, so all right, well, this should have happened seamlessly. Wait a minute, let me do that. And this is our GForce. Oh, there we go. Okay, sorry, that's took me a second. So the other feature is that if people want to look at something when they're training, and you can project this GForce window screen on a separate monitor, so you have access to this, and your client looks at the secondary feedback that is available through, this is just a software that where, gets its images that's based on a mathematical formula and produces images. But this also, the image freezes in milliseconds, the same time that the music freezes. So there is a little bit of secondary feedback, but it's not required for the training. And certainly if you're training children, it's much easier to not have them focus on the screen unless you've downloaded movies, and you can have them watch a movie, and then the auditory of the movie becomes the source of the primary auditory feedback and also the secondary visual feedback. But I know for a lot of families who are training their kids who are on the autism spectrum, it is really great to not have to have them look at a screen, because for some of them, that's a very difficult thing to be able to focus like that. Also too, with that population, some families also train their kids when they're asleep. And because they have sensory issues and they don't like feeling the sensors so much. And so the parents train them when they're asleep, the brain still listens to the music. So the training still happens. So that's kind of a nice thing about the NeurOptimal system, is you have that kind of flexibility in terms of whether or not someone has to be looking. Because I know for some people that's that's a hard thing. So let's see. Someone asked me a question, what can I do a NeurOptimal session on somebody while they're having a massage? This is a massage therapist. And the answer is yes. So again, because this feedback is happening for that automatic functioning brain, you can be giving them a massage. Someone could be doing something like reading. There's lots of opportunities for people to be able to close their eyes or have a conversation with somebody. So long as they can hear the music, the training is happening, right? So people will ask, well, how do you know it's a good session? Two things. One is that the sensors are firmly attached to the sides of the head and clipped to the ears, and that they can hear the music. And then you have a good hookup and you have a good session. So another common question that we get is, how do you track progress? And the main way that we track progress, so I'm trained as a psychotherapist, that's my background, and I brought it into my psychotherapy practice 10 years ago. And in the beginning, I would use there is some graphing that you can show people, a pre and a post, to show more efficiency of brain functioning from the beginning to the end of the session. But actually, I have found over the years that doing that actually isn't that helpful. And the emphasis we place on whether people are coming into the office to do sessions or rented a system from us and are training at home is our checklist is essential. And the checklist has a whole range of issues. And Sarah, maybe if you could put the link to our checklist in the chat window and people can take a look at that. So basically what we do is we have them fill out the checklist at the beginning of training. And then every 8 to 10 sessions or once a month, whichever is longer. So people who are training at home, sometimes they are training every day. And so we would ask those people to do the checklist once a month. But what they see is that they see that their 10s are starting to shift and become 6s, 7s. And one of the really important things that happens is that it prompts people to be self-aware. And that's a really important feature, because what I want people to get out of this training is, obviously, I want whatever issues they have that they're addressing through the training to, start to be resolved. But I also want people to be aware of when they're in that state of regulation, which is calm, grounded, able to focus, feeling a sense of openness, playfulness, creativity, sleeping better, not ruminating mentally, able to use words rather than finding themselves screaming at people. For them to really start to notice that they're in that state, and also notice when they start to wobble. Because part of the bigger picture of this is that really we're talking about what optimizes brain health, what optimizes that ability for the brain to be flexible, right? And move in and out of states and not get stuck in a state. And so there are lots of things that we know contribute to that. Getting exercise, what kind of diet somebody has, what kind of relationships they have, whether they're taking supplements or not. There are lots of things that contribute to the brain's health. And so part of what we want people to get out of training is to be able to notice when they start to wobble, right? When their system is less than optimal, so they know that it's time to bring in more resourcing, whether it's making sure they prioritize their sleep, get some exercise, do a NeurOptimal session. Lots of things come together to support being in that optimal state of, cognitive and emotional wellness. So let's see, Sarah, are there any questions? I could kind of go on and keep talking, but maybe let me know if there are any questions I should address.
Yes, there is one. Can this device track the strong feelings of a person, like panic or sorrow or happiness over a period of time?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the way that we would be tracking whatever emotions the person has would be in that checklist. And we even have a checklist that's very specific and that people can fill in what it is that they would like to see shift or notice change. And then they rate it in terms of frequency, duration, and intensity. Because the thing that this actually is prompting me to talk about something that's really important, which is that going back to the non-linearity of the brain. So part of what we want people to be educated about in seeing positive change when it comes to the neurofeedback training. So they're tracking their numbers, right? So, when they do their first session, feeling anxious might be at a 10, right? 10 being the worst. Is that we want people to understand that the brain changes in a non-linear way, but we think about change, positive change, in a linear way, right? So the example of that is, it's like a consistent, positive, predictable graph going up. So happiness every day is slightly better, the opposite, right? Feeling anxious a little bit less every day. That's how we think of like, oh, things are improving. But the brain doesn't change in a linear way, right? So a non-linear change system that we're all familiar with is the weather. So if we get a dump of snow, beginning of April, we don't go, oh my goodness, spring's not happening this year, we're back to winter, weather doesn't work, right? We don't leap to that conclusion because we understand the weather is a non-linear system. So now let's apply that to feeling anxious, which is that, we're training, we're doing our NeurOptimal sessions and we're feeling more relaxed, a little more grounded. And then we might have a day where we feel awful and we're anxious and we're right? And then we're like, oh my God, it's not working. And this is where we have to understand that actually, no, the brain is a nonlinear system. So we shouldn't anticipate that every day, right, we're going to have that gradual decrease in anxious feelings and that's the only way. We're going to have blips, right? We're going to have days that maybe we go back to, old functioning. Obviously the trend line, right, is going in that way that we think about it linearly, but in terms of our moment-to-moment experience or a day-to-day experience, there's going to be ups and downs, and we want people to understand that. So when someone is tracking emotions, we're using the checklist and we're having people self-rate them. And then over time, we expect that those numbers to shift and to go down. So we don't use the system at all for assessing like how somebody's doing in any moment. We're not looking at this mirror matrix and saying like, oh, they're really emotional, or gosh, I can tell they're not sleeping. Look at that data, that delta wave. That's not how we use this device. We rely on those checklists. Sarah, can you read me that question that just popped up?
Yes. Can we benefit of such device with people who may be in coma in any way?
That is a great question. So one of our favorite populations to serve are people with head injuries. So unfortunately, what we've come to understand about head injury recovery is that same process of becoming habituated and not registering present moment needs also happens when we have a head injury. So that brain really craves present moment data to be able to register that it still has work to do. So because we're using the auditory feedback, right, and the brain is still able to hear even when it's asleep or it's in a coma, you can absolutely train people who are in a coma. And obviously they're not going to be reporting changes until they are awake. And maybe this is when we switch over and talk about stroke, people recovering from strokes, which is the feedback is that from, their speech therapists, their physical therapists, is that people who are doing NeurOptimal when they're recovering from a stroke is that those providers see those patients change more quickly than the average patient who's not doing NeurOptimal. So we can kind of assume then with that head injury that's in a state of a coma, that there is positive benefit in the brain is registering that feedback. It's being alerted to pay attention to itself, right? So it's getting real-time data. So then it's prompted, it's self-prompted to keep doing the repair work, because that's the cueing to pay attention to itself that is so required for the human brain to register and shift out of habitual patterns. That's another way you could describe the system, is we're prompting it. Pay attention to what you're doing, recognize which of your habits are not serving your present moment needs, internal needs, external environmental needs. I see somebody else is just maybe asking a question. So going back to talking a little bit, because I know someone had sent us a question about what's the difference between NeurOptimal and the other protocol systems or linear systems. One of the main things to remember about this system is that it is a non-invasive system. So we're not forcing any state change. We're purely interrupting music. That's actually the only event that is taking place, is that music is playing and there are micro interruptions. And when there are 3 or 4 back to back, you hear it as kind of like a record skipping or like a little sound. But most of them you don't even hear because they're happening at the speed at which we don't consciously hear things. But that's the only event that's taking place with the NeurOptimal system. It's just cues, but cues that are happening in the exact millisecond that the brain is performing a function, and we want it to pay attention. And so the benefit is that it's a non-invasive system. It's safe to use at any age. So we have people using this system on small children, infants, and then of course, seniors. The whole age range is appropriate. And as well as you don't need an expert trainer setting protocols. So it's really safe for anybody to use. As I showed you, it's very, very, very simple to operate. So in 2018, just to kind of let you know a little bit about how the FDA views this system. In 2018, the FDA actually asked to look at this system, and it did. NeurOptimal requested that they see it as a general wellness product as opposed to a medical device because it's safe and non-invasive. And they did receive that designation from the FDA as a general wellness device. So further kind of confirmation that the FDA views this as a safe device for anybody to use, and they don't need to be under the care of a doctor. And of course, that's in the United States. I know there are some of you who are watching the webinar who are elsewhere. But it's good to have that reassurance because a lot of families are very attracted to this system and want to know that it's safe for their children to use. And so one of the big differences between this system and the protocol or linear systems is obviously those systems are not appropriate for home use because you need to have protocols set, you need the constant monitoring because you're nudging the brain out of certain brain waves and into others. And so you can kind of get little sort of momentary side effects which communicate that they need to reset the protocols. So with those systems, they're only appropriate for in-office. What else? Let's see, what time is it? We have 3 more minutes. So if there are any questions, please feel free to ask them. You're very welcome.
Perhaps at the end of the session, you can show what is recorded.
Oh, yes, that's a very good idea, Sarah. Thank you. Okay, so let's toggle to the other screen because we're stopping it before it's over. So, one of the things you can do here is you can actually pause a session. So there's a pause button here. And so if someone has to go to the bathroom, you can just unhook the amplifier and the person can go to the bathroom, come back, hook back in, and you can press the resume button and resume the session. Oh, and then this is just asking you, do you want to resume? Yes. I don't know what this is saying because I can't quite read it. Oh, it's gone. Okay, so I'm going to stop the session here. And then what you see at the end is you see the date of the session and the time under my name. And then you can go into the tools function and you can show the graph. You can show the graph that shows sorry, nope, that's not there. If you press on the session itself, you can show the tunnel. Actually, no, I accidentally pressed on the waterfall, which is a different information. So for people who are doing research with NeurOptimal, there's tons of data that you can access from the session. I, as a psychotherapist, look at none of it. Okay, hopefully that one was the tunnels. Yes, okay. So this isn't really going to show you much of anything. Oh, it does a little bit, just because for the most of the part, I haven't been able to hear the music. But so this corner one, basically what you want to see, it doesn't really show it in this one. I should have pulled a different one. Anyway, is that the tunnel gets narrower from the beginning of the session to the end of the session. And you can move this around. You can look at it in all sorts of different ways. And that's something you can show your clients to say, hey, I want to show you that your brain utilized the information it received through the feedback and became more efficient in its use of energy over the session. And, for some people, they love that because they really think that maybe their brain is broken. So for some people, that's very, very reassuring to see that data. And then there's all sorts of functions that you have, including being able to access a live tech support call where they take over the system if you're having some issue. You can check the health of your sensors through a function here to make sure they're running properly. Lots of really great functions in here, and you can store the data if for some reason you wanted to store it. But basically what happens is that all of the sessions a person has done get listed here automatically when they're done. So at any point you can see how many sessions a person has done. There's also, if you have multiple names, you just click on the bottom, there's the letters of names, and you can pull up different people. And you can download and access movies, things like that are helpful in terms of if you're training children and they want to be able to listen to different music or watch a movie. And then to close out the program, you just press the X. And any software updates, they're usually synchronized with Windows updates. When you open the program, you'll get a pop-up window that says there's an update for the software. Do you want to download? So those come automatically when you purchase the system. You get your software updates. It does require to be hooked up to Wi-Fi once a week so that it can relicense itself. And one of the things I should say about NeurOptimal, which is different than a lot of neurofeedback systems, is that there is no ongoing fee that you have to pay for your license. There is what's called a pass membership, which is a voluntary membership that includes free tech support, being listed as a trainer on the NeurOptimal website, access to forms, and all sorts of interesting old webinars you can watch. And also it gets you access to 0% financing if you want to finance the system. And also a referral fee if any of your clients decide that they want to purchase a system. So those are part of the features of the pass membership, which is an annual fee, but you don't have to. So a unique thing really that I see about NeurOptimal compared to some of the other systems out there is that once you own your system, you own your system outright. You have no financial obligation to NeurOptimal going forward. Any other final questions? We're at the end of our time here. When we send everybody a copy of this webinar, I will include some links, a link to the NeurOptimal new user resource page, our rental page if somebody wants to try renting a system before you decide to purchase. Some people do that. I'll also send you a link to the product page so you can see the cost and everything about the system, as well as a link to our checklist so you can see the main tracking tool that we use in our practice. Any final questions? All right, well, thank you very much, everybody, for joining me on this Friday. And of course, email me or call me if you have any personal questions about the device or how you might integrate it into your practice or your professional life, working with specific clients, anything like that. I'm here and available, so please reach out to me. You're very welcome. Thank you, Jason. And yeah, everybody have a great weekend.